Welcome to the Sens Spotlight podcast brought to you by the Sick Podcast Network. Bet the beauties with Betway and scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link in the details section to create an account and download the app. Must be 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Also, for our YouTube fans out there, please hit the hype button and like and subscribe to Sens Spotlight. That really helps us out. And on today's show, we have the great Scott Wheeler of The Athletic. So we'll go into some prospects with the Senators. So I think it'll be a really fun show for all the fans out there. And yeah, hit it.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Send Spotlight.
Here's Alfredson bursts the speed, gets a shot away, score! Daniel Alfredson ends the game in overtime and sends the Ottawa Senators to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time in franchise history.
The sickest Ottawa Senators podcast. It's gonna be sick.
And we are joined by Scott Wheeler of The Athletic. Thanks so much for taking the time and doing this. How much fun have you had just with hockey back? I know it's been a couple of weeks now, but just getting in the swing of things.
Yeah, it's been good. Hockey never, if I'm being completely honest, it doesn't ever really end for me. I don't get that sort of August break that my colleagues at The Athletic who cover NHL beats get, where they get through the thick of free agency and then through the thick of free agency right until basically their rookie tournaments, they get 4 or 5 weeks off. With the Holinka and the World Junior Summer Showcase and everything that goes on the prospect calendar in the summer, I don't really get that. So it never really feels like it stops. And then obviously at Christmas time, when everybody gets that break, I'm normally flying somewhere to go cover the World Juniors. So that's not me complaining. Best job in the world, wouldn't change a thing, but it's hockey season is 365 on the prospect side a little bit, but it has been nice. It's been nice. I've been to a bunch of OHL games already. I'm ramping up travel again. I'll be at the Michigan State Penn State series in a couple of weekends, which I'm really looking forward to. As we record this, I'm a couple of days out from going down to Saginaw for a 3-3. I'm going to see the Spirit play 3 games in 3 nights and do a story, a sort of special story with them that I've been meaning to do for a while. And then we'll be into that November. Once you're into November, then you've got the CHL USA Prospect Series, which is in Calgary and Lethbridge this year. So I'll be out there for that. And then once I'm back from that, you're right into Canada's camp ahead of the World Juniors, which is going to be in Niagara Falls this year. So I'm looking forward to that.
It's always busy with you, Scott. I have a curious question that I was thinking about before the show, just with where the Senators at and how they've acquired a lot of their talent. A lot of it was from the 2020 draft. Tim Stützle, Jake Sanderson, Ridley Gregg, Levi Merilainen, Tyler Clevin. There's a lot of names. Have you ever seen a draft like that for a team where they've just compiled so many talented, impactful players in one draft?
There's definitely been a few over the years, but you look back on that Sens class now, and it's a franchise changer, right? If they draft, let's say, Cole Perfetti instead of Tim Stützle or Jake Sanderson, that kind of a thing, or Marco Rossi, or name any of those guys, it's probably a different outcome. There's a case to be made, and it's one that I've made when I did my prospects I was wrong about and wrote about Jake Sanderson and me being too low on Jake Sanderson at the time. But there's a case to be made now, and I went over it in my redraft a summer or 2 ago.
Yeah.
There's a case to be made that those are the 2 best players in the class. And then they're not the only 2 players that you got from the class either. So a lot to be said about the job they've done. I mean, we can talk about Shane Pinto a little bit later too, but they've done a really nice job. And frankly, the previous regime, as much heat as they took for some of their mismanagement and some of the mistakes that they made along the way, and I don't think they were the right team to take. They were the right management group to take the team forward, and I think they're in good hands now with Andlauer and Staios and company. But in saying that, they do deserve a lot of credit for that class in particular and the job they did with that class in particular. And Jake is phenomenal, and we all know what Timmy is. So they've been the namesake of my fantasy hockey team actually at the Athletic over the last couple of years. We were Timmy's superstars for a couple of years. He was one of my keepers in our league at the Athletic that we do with our staff, and we're now Sander and Sons. So I've got Sanderson as a keeper. So I'm fully committed to the Sens bandwagon here for purely selfish reasons.
What did you miss maybe at the time with Sanderson, or what were you maybe low
Yeah.
on?
I think one of the problems I had in that era, there was a 2 or 3 year stretch there in my evaluations where I don't think I was doing a good enough job adjusting over the course of a year when guys really took off. Like Sanderson was a very good prospect entering that draft class, but he wasn't viewed as one of the premium deep prospects in the draft. There was more hype around Jamie Drysdale, for example, sort of entering into that season. And what changed was over the course of the year, in part because of his summer birthday, he really took off in the second half. And I just don't think I caught up quickly enough. I moved him up my list and he started the year as kind of a late first and then ended the year in the teens for me. But and I knew that people and scouts, et cetera, were talking about him as a top 5 guy. And I'd spoken to people at the combine that year and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I think part of it was just because of how steep that progress was in the second half. I think I was maybe too entrenched in the player that he was entering his draft year versus the player he actually became over the course of his draft year. His real breakout was it was then called the BioSteel All-American game. It's now the Chipotle All-American game, but he was tremendous. I was there in Plymouth for that game, and he was the best player on the ice in that game. And from that point on, he was the best player on that team as well. And I just didn't adjust quickly enough in terms of moving him ahead of some guys on my list. And I ran into the other bit. It's one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in doing this work. But the other big one is a similar one in Moritz Seider. Same story with the Red Wings, right? Drafted 6th overall, kind of began that year as a late first round pick, maybe even an early second round pick in terms of the way that he was perceived. Was good, but not great to start the year in the DEL. And then really in the second half of Mo Seider's draft year, it was similar to Jake, where he just took off. He became an impactful player in the DEL and then was excellent at Men's Worlds. My last list in Mo Seider's year actually came out before Men's Worlds. So I probably should have done another list after he was great at Men's Worlds for Germany. But that was kind of a problem that I identified in my evaluations for a period there, where I go back and I look at some of those draft classes and I do my redrafts and my evaluations of my own list. And the guys, frankly, that I tended to get wrong were just the guys who sort of really hit that steep upward climb late in the year. And I didn't adjust quickly enough on them.
Yeah, I think it must be such a hard thing for you to look at the pedigree of a guy coming up when he's 16, 17, if he's the best, and then you see other guys kind of coming from behind, and it's like, who's better, right? Like,
and I mean, we even saw it a year ago with Beckett Seneke, right? Like Beckett climbing to 3rd overall after early in that season, he was getting benched I was at Oshawa Generals games showing up to see him play, and he wasn't playing because he was sitting on the bench and they wouldn't play him. And there was the attitude issues and all this stuff circling around Beckett Seneke. And then the second half of the year, he was just on a rocket ship, right? And then we all saw his reaction when he was stunned that the Anaheim Ducks took him 3rd overall, right? So there's always 1 or 2 guys in every draft class that sort of have that in-season ascent that change the way that they're perceived. Mason McTavish was a little bit the same way in his draft year when he skyrocketed up. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the Ducks also took Mason McTavish. So they clearly pay attention to those kids. But McTavish was probably viewed as a mid to late first round pick when he started that draft year, right? And then he also went 3rd overall. So there's always a guy like that who sort of creeps their way up.
I'll put my hand up and say that I wanted Philip Zadina and I wanted Jamie Drysdale, and I was very wrong about both decisions. So Pierre Dorion deserves a lot of credit for those two. Talking about the new regime and Steve Staios, his first pick that he ever had was Carter Yakemchuk, and I'm just curious how you feel about his development so far and how he's done in the AHL and just him as a player. Like, what do you see like his pathway forward?
Well, I don't think it's a secret that last year was just okay for him. He was still one of the most talented players in the WHL, and he still made his plays and pounded that shot of his, and he's got the hands and the size and the physicality and all of the elements that made him a top 10 pick. But he didn't really I wouldn't say he took a leap last year. Like it wasn't a really positive season. And oddly enough, I kind of expected that it would be after he was very good in his first training camp, right? And even that training camp was a bit of a mixed bag. I know he almost made the Sens a year ago, but entering that, I was in Buffalo at their rookie tournament. He kind of ran hot and cold at their rookie tournament, had some tough moments there, although he did create, and that team was abysmal. The rookie tournament team that the Sens sent 2 years ago to Buffalo, they were a little bit stronger this year when they made the trip out to Montreal. But yeah, it was just a bit of a mixed bag season for him. Obviously didn't make the World Junior team, which it was something that I think coming out of Sens camp, he would have, with how long he stuck around in Sens camp, you would have expected him to be on that World Junior team. And then he didn't even get an invite to the selection camp process. And you go down the list. It just wasn't a great season for him. This year, I've watched 2 of his, as we record this, he's played 4 games in the AHL. I watched his debut, and then in preparation for the podcast, I watched his second game last night. He looked better in the first game than he did in the second game. He's been on for a lot of goals against. The team is struggling, though. Like the group in Belleville this year is not off to a good start. And I think that sort of especially has more pronounced effects when you're a rookie and you're a player who's sort of cutting his teeth at the pro level for the very first time. The challenge for Yakemchuk is the same one today that it was when he got drafted. And frankly, it's one that I've talked to Steos about both on and off the record over the last couple of years. And it's the athlete and how far the actual athleticism can get him. He's not a great mover in the gym, on the ice. You talk to people around him, like it's just never been a natural thing for him. He's not that sort of prototypical athlete who can play every sport kind of thing. And the movement and the mobility is a bit of an issue defensively at times. He can struggle in his pivots and he can get burned wide. And that is what's going to determine his ceiling. He has the talent, like you think about Evan Bouchard and Brent Burns and those sort of big defensemen with the big point shot and the skill on the puck and a little bit of physicality. Like I've always sort of come back to Brent Burns, but Brent Burns is kind of a borderline Hall of Famer, right? And part of the reason that Brent Burns has been able to be so productive offensively over the course of his career is because he's also been counted on enough. He's never been a great defender. He's not a Hall of Fame defender, but he's been counted on enough to play 25 to 30 minutes for much of his career. And Yakemchuk's going to have to, if he wants to have the offensive impact that I think everyone realizes he's capable of having, he's going to have to be able to defend at that level. And Bouchard's kind of another one that I think is analogous just because he does have some of those same deficiencies. Like he will occasionally cough the puck up. He will get burned. He'll get caught flat-footed. I think it's a big reason why Evan Bouchard wasn't on the Canadian Four Nations team last year, was just despite the talent offensively and how good he's been in 2 deep playoff runs to the Cup final with Edmonton, he's just there's that odd mistake that can kill you in a gold medal game kind of thing. And I think there's a little bit of that in Yakemchuk as well. That the talent is there, the size, the physicality, the shot. He's got incredible hands for a player his size. But it's just going to be, is it going to come with one bad mistake every night that results in a puck in the back of the net kind of thing? And he's going to have to reduce those numbers. And those mistakes have been there early on in the AHL, but again, I mean, it's
2 games. Yeah. Is it for you as much the skating aptitude, or is it the processing of the game, or is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both. Like, I don't think he's a terrible skater. Like he's just a below average skater, I would say. And I don't think he's a terrible processor of the game, but it's also about average. And the combination of those things just could limit his upside a little bit. So this isn't meant to be a woe is Carter Yakemchuk evaluation.
Sure.
Like, Carter is one of the better D prospects in the game. So I don't want to get it twisted that way, but there are areas in his game that need work. And that's, I mean, we're watching Simon Nemec has only just become second overall pick, who's only just become a full-time NHLer 3 years later with the New Jersey Devils. We've watched Zane Parekh struggle early on this season. Zeev Boyum has had some tough nights early on this season. Like this is a process for all those kids. David Jiricek went 6th overall and is still playing in the AHL a few years later and has been traded already. So it takes defenseman time. Don't be alarmed if he's not a finished product at 21 or 22 even, right? Like it's going to take him some time, and you just hope that someday, even if he doesn't get to Bouchard or Brent Burns, that someday he can get sort of inch closer to that, right?
Yeah, I guess, like, what do you project him as? Like, is he that, like, Shane Gostisbehere, but doesn't play like Shane Gostisbehere a little bit, like, in terms of offensive, top 4 defenseman, but you probably don't trust him in all situations? Like,
Yeah.
what do you project Yakemchuk as in the
Well, I
NHL?
think if the mobility comes, he can be a lot more than that. Like if he becomes an average NHL skater and the reps help him polish up some of the occasional brain cramps or mistakes, then suddenly you've got a 6'3" defenseman who's got some meanness and physicality and size to him, who can also make plays, which is where the sort of Brent Burns of it has always come into mind for me. I think that's what you're aiming for. You're aiming for maybe a budget version of what Brent Burns has been during his career. That's kind of what I've always imagined for Carter.
Interesting. How close do you think he is to the NHL? Is it maybe a year, 2? I know it's
tough. I think I'll probably have a better sense when I finish my prospect pool rankings in January and I do another 5 or 6 viewings on him. And he's sort of played some of those viewings are November and December games. I think that the Sens will have a much better sense at the midway point, but it's not going to be this year. Like I'd be surprised unless one of their power play quarterbacks go down and he's playing well for a few games and they want to give him a game or two. But even then, I think the most likely scenario for him is that he spends at least this season in the AHL, and then you give him another opportunity in camp next year to potentially make the team. But I don't think he's even a guarantee to make the team next year necessarily. So I think a lot will depend on the way that he plays in the next 2 or 3 months here. I'll have a much better feel for where he's at the pro level come January, February when I'm doing my pool rankings.
For sure. It does seem like the Senators love the right shot defenseman because this summer they drafted Logan Hensler in the first round at the 23rd pick. Just what have you seen from him? Just being around him and just covering him and watching him. Like, what do you project him as, and how do you think he can maybe develop this year at Wisconsin?
Yeah, Hensler's a really interesting and complicated player, right? This is a kid who, entering out of his U17 season at the program, was viewed as a potential top 10 pick in last year's draft class. Skates really well, has the size, moves the puck well, defends decently well with his stick. But the one thing that emerged as a bit of a pattern into his U18 year and then into his freshman year at Wisconsin last year was just a desire, despite the fact that he was still a top D in his age group and still became a first-round pick. There was just a desire and a want from NHL scouts and from even coaches who'd worked with him at the NTDP and then at Wisconsin for him to develop more of an identity. Like, there are nights where he's a little passive and he's deferring and he's trying to simplify his game and focus on defending. And there are nights where he really flashes his skating and his skill level and looks like a potential power play quarterback. And then the through line through that has been a desire to want him to be more physical, to want him to really own it on the ice, like really own that offensive identity or really own the defensive identity. And he was kind of caught in between. And it became a question of, okay, what is this kid? Like, can he be a penalty killer? Can he be a power play guy? Is he just a 5-on-5 two-way type? Or is he just an offensive 5-on-5 type? Can he be a top 4 guy? Is he going to be a third pairing guy? And I kind of came back to some of those in-between players. I've always kind of compared him to the guys who I see as kind of tweeners, guys who've been top 4 defensemen their entire careers and have maybe produced 30 or 40 points a few times, but haven't really been clear-cut go-to guys for their team. So I think of like Damon Severson, for example, or Brady Shea, or like that caliber of defenseman is what I think he's kind of striving for. Now, Brady Shea got I think a $7 million annual deal to sign that big contract with Nashville.
I think so.
Damon Severson has made $4 to $6 million a year throughout his career. Like that's kind of what I envision for Hensler. I don't think he's ever going to be like a top 3 guy on a blue line, but he might not be a 6-7 either. Like he could still be a valuable sort of number 4-5 guy, runs your second power play, plays a regular shift at 5-on-5. But the want is still there. I've watched a little bit of Wisconsin to start this season as well, and he's been good but not great. And everybody just wants to see him sort of just take charge on the ice, on both offensively and defensively a little bit more, play with a little more jam and spirit kind of thing.
Is that a competitiveness attribute, or is it just kind of an identity, as you said, which is a bit different than want? It's almost like how you go about it.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. He took offense. Like I talked to him a little bit most recently at the Combine. I spoke with him for a little bit, and then the Into the World Junior Summer Showcase, I was sort of tracking to see how he would look throughout the summer and that kind of a thing. And I remember talking to him at the Combine. He was kind of defiant about that. He had a very much I'm going to prove people wrong. I'm going to be that next year. Like I'm going to elevate next year and take a step. Now that we're only 4 couple of weekends into the college hockey season, 4 games in, but that hasn't happened early. Like he hasn't been one of the, I think he's talented enough that he could have been one of the early talking points of the season where we're going, whoa, Logan's really taken a step, a lot like people are talking about Michael Hage with Michigan and that kind of a thing. And we push with Penn State and some of the guys, Serrato with Penn State, some of the guys who've really elevated their games this year. We just haven't seen that yet. So it's still kind of a bit of a waiting game. And yet he's a very good player. Like he's a world junior player for Team USA. Like he's still a top player in this age group. It's just what's he going to be at the NHL level? I think that's what he needs to show people. He needs to have a clear identity that says this is going to be my role.
How often have you seen players maybe at 18, 19 not really know their way or who they are, and then maybe at 21, 22 find their way as a player? Like how often do you see that?
It's not often, but it's not unheard of either. Like you look around the league, there are tons of like I didn't know what Connor Zary was going to be at that age, right? And Zary's become a decent player for the Calgary Flames. He was kind of another guy who was a very good junior player, very skilled, could play with pace, but he wasn't a great skater. Average size, wasn't going to be a checker in the NHL, but you wondered whether he was going to be a scorer or two. I think of, frankly, his teammate, Morgan Frost, a little bit as well. Like Frost was a kid when he was in the Sioux that kind of had a little bit of that sort of identity issue. And then there are other kids who just never get there. Like, right? Like I think of Brendan Brisson, who was a first-round pick of the Vegas Golden Knights and played for the Chicago Steel and then at the University of Michigan and has now already been traded. Brendan was that player, right? Like he had this big one-timer and he was a power play guy at lower levels, but he didn't have the skating and he didn't have the size. And so you wondered if he could be a top 6 guy in the NHL. And you knew based off of his demeanor that he wasn't going to be a checker. Like there's always those guys that sometimes get caught in the middle a little bit, and you can quickly turn into just an AHLer if you're that kind of a player. I think the benefit that Hensler has is that he's 6'3" and he can skate. And so even without maybe a clear-cut identity or a clear-cut role, those guys typically get more of an opportunity to prove it and to make it, right?
It feels like if you can skate and you're big, it's you need to miss, you have to swing and miss a lot in the NHL to not have an opportunity to play a lot of games. So hopefully he turns around. Hopefully he finds his identity, as Steve Staios always says, a bit tongue in cheek for my liking, but we need to figure out who is an Ottawa Senator and what it means to be an Ottawa Senator. I don't know if Hensler has shown that so far, and
to be fair to Dorion, for all of his and that group's faults, we always knew what he wanted in a player, right? Like they had a clear vision, especially on the amateur scouting side, of what they liked. And it was the super competitive, the good kids, the physically mature, physically, like it was the Tyler Bouchers, right? Like that was the player that they liked. And to a certain degree, that sort of ultra competitive, focus, sometimes at the expense of maybe skill and playmaking and some of those tools, has continued a little bit with Staios. Like they've drafted Gabriel Eliasson, you go down the list, like they've prioritized that identity. And it has worked for them with some picks. Like I think Blake Montgomery, for example, is a solid selection, and he's off to a bit of a slow start as well at Wisconsin. But guys like Blake Montgomery and Jordan Donovan and some of these guys they have that sort of Senators identity that they've tried to build. I think that the cost of that on the prospect pool side is that it can result in a lot of guys who project as sort of third, fourth line players, depth defensemen, when your focus is so much on guys who are competitive and that side of it as their strongest attribute. At least I think everybody wants competitive players, but it's been a focus, I think, at times to a fault with this group over the years. But the result is that you do get guys like Clevin and others who just are warriors, right? So I'll be interested to see sort of how it works out for this group, and whether they stray for that or double down on that. Like even some of the guys with the AHL club, like I was watching the other night, I was just watching Oscar Pettersson and some of these guys that were Pettersson was a World Junior player for Sweden, right? And not just a World Junior player, he played on their first line at a World Juniors. But he's become just a competitive mid-tier pro, right? And so that they've got to find some talent as well. And Yakemchuk's obviously the big swing, but it needs to be more than Yakemchuk, especially if they want to sort of insulate around what they have at the NHL level with Pinto and with Tim and with Jake and the sort of and Drake and the core of the group that's already established at the NHL. That's a good core, but you always need more in the NHL because other teams are always adding and trying to find ways to find talent.
How would you maybe assess their last two drafts in the Staios era? I
think it's been a bit of a mixed bag for me. I wouldn't have taken Yakemchuk where they did, and ultimately I think your drafts are by and large determined by the players that you take at the very top. I was just not partial. Like there were 60 in that draft, right? And Yakemchuk was my 6th. And that still made him a top 10, top 12, top 13 pick for me all day in that age group. And that's where he was, sort of in that 10 to 12 range on my board all year. But I still would have taken Sam Dickinson or Zeev Boyum or even Anton Salayev at the time, although I think there's probably a case to be made that Yakemchuk's a better prospect than Anton Salayev. But that's sort of how I viewed that. I think if they were going to go deep, I would have taken Zane Parekh there for sure. I would have taken Zeev there for sure. I would have taken Dickinson there. Like those would have been my guys all day long. But they still got a player there. It's after that I think they've run into it. Like I wouldn't have touched Gabe Eliasson where they did, for example. Like I just
that's the one pick that seems baffling from someone that isn't a prospect nor like you, that no one, like he seemed to be a 4th, 5th round pick kind of in that vicinity.
Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. I like Lucas Beck. Like their pool really thins out after Hensler and Yakemchuk, if I'm being honest. I like Beckman. Like that team in Baie-Comeau that he's on is terrible, like absolutely terrible this year. And he's still been very good. So that's promising. I think teams were a little shy from taking him because he was a 6'1", maybe 6'2" with heels on kind of goalie who isn't that ultra. Like when you're looking for us at a smaller goalie, you want that ultra athlete, right? Like that freak athlete, that Marc-Andre Fleury, Jonathan Quick type athlete. And he doesn't have that either. But Beckman just is so composed and controlled and just seems to make the saves that he's supposed to make. And so I thought Beckman was a nice find. I think the rest has been a bit of a mixed bag over the last couple of years.
You wrote a great piece on Blake Montgomery. I know he's had a bit of a struggle. Maybe not. I mean, it's only a couple games, it's small sample size, but just what do you think he can maybe project as? Like, could he become an NHLer one day as a guy who was picked in the 4th round and really took off last year in London?
Yeah, I think the path for Blake is simple. It's become what Ostapchuk became, right? Like that's what you're looking to build with him, is that sort of rangy, athletic, skating, north-south, get after it on the forecheck, score on a breakaway the odd time, challenge some D with your speed player, and just really embrace that identity. And he did certainly in London last year, obviously won a Memorial Cup in London. But on top of that, he just has the tools. Like he's an act for a six. I think he's like up to six. He just keeps growing. I think he's like 6'5" now. He can fly. Like he gets up and down the ice fast, and on top of that, he can shoot it, and he's got decent handles. He's not the smartest player. Like that's always kind of been his Achilles heel. Like he doesn't think the game at that pace. But there are players all around the NHL who've had good careers as fourth line forwards in the NHL who just are big and skate and finish checks. The challenge for Blake is that, and I got into it a little bit with him in that piece, but he's also struggled to add weight. So a lot of the guys who play that style play it in a really heavy way. And he'll finish his checks, and he's a competitive kid, but you see him around the ice and he's like skin and bones, which is a little ironic because you see his brother around the rink. His brother's an ECHL defenseman, and his brother is a mammoth, like just a big, thick guy who also has the mobility. They play different positions. His brother plays D. But Blake just hasn't had that. Maybe it's just metabolism, a little bit different sort of way that he's wired, but he's kind of a wiry kid, and he's a strong kid, and he'll win some battles, but he's never going to be that sort of that Tom Wilson, Milan Lucic either, right? And I think when you're that big and you can skate like that, that's really what teams want you to be. So he may end up a little bit of a tweener that way, but he's interesting. And if nothing else, I liked the decision there to take him as an overager and to take a chance on him. Same thing with Bruno. Like Idzon,
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether he ever becomes anything, but I thought he was interesting, and they have, to their credit, taken some interesting players, some unique players. So including Eliasson, who I don't think is ever going to play a game in the NHL, but who is fascinating as a case study. So I don't know whether any of those kids will ever actually make it, but they're going to be interesting to track.
How difficult do you think it will be for Steos? Because in terms of trying to acquire talent with the lack of prospect capital and pick capital, obviously they don't have their first round pick this year. Hopefully it's not in the lottery, which would be just abysmal. But how much are his hands tied behind his back in terms of trying to improve the roster with the prospects he has in the cabinet?
Yeah, there's no question that his hands are tied, and I feel for Steos, especially on that pick specifically, and frankly, I feel for Andlauer as well, because it really has nothing to do with them. So yeah, it's a really tough spot to be in, and it's going to put pressure on them to start to hit on some of those second rounders, to find another Shane Pinto, to find another Tyler Clevin. Like they've got to turn some of these kids into NHLers, and they've shown that they can do it in the past. It's not entirely the same group, but there are some amateur scouts who are holdovers from the Dorion era. So it's on them, man. Like as much as you can moan about the circumstances, you still got to go out and find players, and there are teams that do it all the time. The Dallas Stars find guys in the second and third round regularly, right? Like there are teams that have figured it out and that do it consistently. And they don't do it always, and they still make mistakes too. And there's a ton of guys I could point to within the Dallas organization, or you name it, who haven't lived up to where they were drafted, if you will. But you got to find guys like they need to elevate the ceiling of the group. They need Yakemchuk to hit. They need Hensler to become a piece of the puzzle. And then they still need to find more, because in the meantime, everybody else is also finding good players. So you can't ever have a rut of 3 or 4 bad drafts. It will seriously impact the organization.
For sure. I guess with that, like from your perspective, how difficult, like the one player that I keep thinking about, and you mentioned to him a couple times, so I feel like I should bring him up, is Shane Pinto. because he was the first pick in the second round in 2019.
Yep.
He's about to get paid a lot of money this summer. Did you ever see him being this like ultra utility, almost 2B type of center that can get you 25, 30 goals, be great defensively? Was that something that you saw in 2019 and even as he was coming up the ranks?
Yeah, frankly, it was, and not to pat myself on the back, but if I'm going to take my lumps for Jake Sanderson, I will gladly say that, yeah, with Pinto,
Feel free.
I loved the player, like loved the player, the way that he defended, the way that he thought the game, his stick detail, the fact that he had size and was a natural center and could be a potential penalty killer. And then he continued to develop both in the USHL and then into college, where he was excellent, and he was excellent at the World Juniors. People forget that World Junior team. The stars of his World Junior team were Nick Robertson and Shane Pinto, and that was on a roster that had Trevor Zegras and Arthur Kaliev and guys who had more quote unquote skill and were viewed as higher end prospects. And yet over the course of that tournament, that's when you really started to see it. When Pinto became the guy for that team, it was, and with all of the top 10 picks that were on that team, you sort of started to wonder, okay, USA Hockey sees it. You could see it in the USHL for sure, especially in his draft year. And in college, you could see it. And by the time he was done in college, it was like, okay, this kid's the real deal. The gambling thing was obviously sort of clouded it for a little bit, but it always felt like this was coming. Like he was going to go from 3C to 2C and become more than a role. He was already a good role player, but was going to become an impact guy. I'm not sure whether I envisioned him getting into the conversation he's now in, which I think is potentially the Olympic team. But his play to start the year has warranted. And I'm sure when they're meeting, which they're meeting right now, because these decisions need to be finalized within the next 6 weeks here. I'm sure when that group is meeting that Shane Pinto is one of the hot topics in the war room for USA Hockey right now. So I'll be fast. Like if I'm picking that team, frankly, and I'm looking for a fourth line player to round out a roster around the core guys, I think Clayton, if you look at who's coming out from Four Nations and who's coming in, who wasn't on that Four Nations team, Clayton Keller's on the team. Like Clayton Keller wasn't a part of Four Nations, but Clayton has played so well since then. He was the captain for them at Men's Worlds. Clayton Keller is going to be on the Olympic team. So then you start to wonder, okay, can two guys come out of that roster? And I think it's realistic that Brock Nelson comes out and Clayton Keller goes in. Can Pinto steal a job from another one of those guys, right? And there were guys on that team who would have maybe been viewed as bubble guys, or at least not locks, who also I think played their way into lock status. Like Dylan Larkin is a lock to make that team now, right? But I think Pinto's right there. I think the two guys, after you put Keller on the team, the two guys that I think are closest in terms of nibbling at the edges are probably Tage Thompson and Shane Pinto. And that's not like, I wouldn't even include Jason Robertson, who's had a 100-point season in the league, in that conversation, or Cole Caulfield. Like I think Pinto fits more than our Jason Robertson or Cole Caulfield to potentially make the bottom of that lineup. I think more than Matthew Nyes as well. I'm sure that they're debating Matthew Nyes, who's also off to a good start in Toronto. But like I'd take Shane Pinto over Matthew Nyes or Brock Nelson for a bottom six role all day, right? So that the fact that he's in that conversation is huge for him, and it's also going to mean that he gets paid.
Kaching, what would you pay him? Like if you gave him, if this sounds like the Senators are offered him an 8-year deal, like is it 7? Is it 7.5? Is it 8? Like how high would you be willing to go, Scott? If you
look around the league at the recent deals that have been signed in that tax bracket, and the one that I go to is Timo Meier, who I think was 8.2 or something with the Devils, or 8.8. I think it actually might have been 8.8. Like Shane Pinto is a more impactful player on games than Timo Meier. And Timo Meier signed that deal with the Devils, a year and a half ago now?
8.8.
8.8, right? So like, would you rather Timo Meyer or Shane Pinto on your team right now? I think the answer is probably Shane Pinto, right? So that's
Sure.
one that I've gone to, just because it's a recent example in that range. And Meyer was he'd had some 70-point seasons, but he was kind of viewed more as a 60-point guy, and maybe not a super, like maybe a low end star player kind of thing. So that I think it's got to start with an 8. Like, I don't think you're getting
Really?
Shane Pinto. I don't think you're getting Shane Pinto signed. I'm not familiar with those negotiations, and frankly, haven't read what the insiders have said about them. But just if I was coming at it from a blank slate, I think you probably start at 8x8.
I guess, like, for some people,
and I don't think you regret that deal either.
I don't think. Yeah, I'm completely on the same boat as you. For me, I think he's much more important to the Senators' long-term success in many ways than Dylan Cousins, which is a really interesting dynamic. But he's been way better.
I think Shane's a better player than Dylan.
Me too. Yeah. The one thing I wondered, they have Stützle playing the left wing probably tonight, and they had him on a line with Batherson and Cousins down the middle. I wonder if Cousins is one day a winger.
Yeah.
And then Shane Pinto becomes the 2C with Stützle behind it. I don't know if the playmaking's there, but he has everything else. He has the shot, unbelievable 200-foot player. Like, yeah. So you nailed it.
Cousins makes 7, right?
7.1, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's that internal cap, right? But we'll see. Yeah. But you were right, Scott. You nailed it from the beginning. Where was he on your draft board? Do you remember at the time?
He wasn't at 33 or 32, wherever they took him. He was like 40 on my list. But if you recall that draft class, he was like in the 50s and 60s for most people. So I was higher on him at the time.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go. Is there, before I let you go, is there anything just at The Athletic, and thanks again for coming on, giving us all your wisdom and knowledge about all things Senators prospects. Is there anything at The Athletic just coming up that you want to promote, or anything that listeners should keep their eyes and ears out for?
No, I mean, the most recent big piece that I did was just I did an embed with the Brantford Bulldogs, where I went behind the scenes with the Brantford Bulldogs, and I know the Sens aren't involved there, but there was a lot of talk within that piece and within that weekend that I spent with the organization, a lot of talk about the foundation that Turek, who's obviously now also general manager of the Belleville Senators for them, a lot of talk about what Turek and Steos and Andlauer had done to move the team to Brantford and what they'd done to build that team, and obviously hiring Jay McKee, who's the head coach of that team and was the runner-up to Rick Tocchet, one of the runner-ups to Rick Tocchet for the head coaching vacancy in Philadelphia this summer. So that was a fun one. There's a lot of parallels between the way that the Brantford Bulldogs were built and the way that the Ottawa Senators are being built, obviously. So I think Sens fans would get something from that piece, so I'd maybe point them that direction.
Okay, cool. Well, check it out. Scott's the best at covering the draft and prospects and everything, really. Yeah, you just know so much about so much in the hockey world, which I find just crazy as someone that likes to sleep 9 hours a night. I don't know how you do it, Scott, but thanks so much for taking the time and doing this. We really appreciate it on the show.
Thanks for having me, dude. And yeah, it's going to be, hopefully we're not, a few months ago, you're not asking me back on to talk about the Sens being outside the playoffs and drafting in the lottery. So
I know, Ross Levitan of the Locked On podcast, Senators podcast. I think after they lost, I forget which game recently, he did the draft simulator and Ottawa had the first pick. And I just wanted to curl up into a ball and be like, just please. We're living in an alternate reality. So Gary Bettman, give back the pick. It wasn't anyone's fault.
I have talked about a lot of draft classes with Ross and Pilsey, and I'm sure for their sake, they would rather stop talking about the draft every May and June.
Yep. It was probably a welcome surprise or welcome delight last year that the team finally made the playoffs and they didn't have to do 85 shows on the prospects.
And now they've got to do it again, and it's hard to do it again when You've got the Rangers that want to be back in, and the Red Wings are off to a 5-1 start, and it gets pretty crowded pretty quickly, and you got to start winning games. So that's on the Sens now.
This game tonight, if they lose against Edmonton, it will feel like the sky is falling, but they might win too. We'll see. Maybe Linus Allmark's unreal, and they finally learn how to kill penalties at a high clip, and everything turns around. So
they do seem to have a way of starting slowly. I mean, it felt like with DJ Smith, it was all we ever talked about, but it's back this year. So
I don't understand it. Just the Senators, they should just like tell the NHL, let's just start December 1st and we'll be fine or something like that. So because they were 8-11-1 in their first 20 games last year, and they turned it around. So there's some hope. They did it last year. Maybe they can do it this year, even without their captain. But we'll see. Well, thanks so much, Scott. We really appreciate it. And hopefully, as you said, we're not talking about the lottery in a couple months' time with you. So awesome. Thanks.
Cheers.
Scott.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Sens Spotlight on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.